welcome everyone to Rock M Radio. This is the beginning of a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. We are live on YouTube for Rock M Plus subscribers. It is season 8 already. We're here to talk about your Missouri Basketball Tigers as the only podcast strictly talking about the Missouri Basketball Tigers. I'm your host, Sam Snelling. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me on your left, I think. We're using new streaming software today, so it's quite possibly this is flipped around for you, but it should be on your left. Take a moment to hit the like button, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so we can help grow the channel a little bit. You will notice that it is not Matt Harris to the right today. It is Matt Watkins, aka at Data Mizzou. Mr. Data Mizzou, how are things there in Glendale?
Doing pretty well. Having a little camera issues, but I think we're all sorted out now using the less sophisticated computer camera, but we'll make do.
Yeah, we're learning. So most people, longtime listeners, may know we are affiliated with Fans First Sports Network. They recently migrated us from StreamYard, which we had been on for more than a year. We're very sort of comfortable with the settings and all that kind of stuff with StreamYard. And now we're using Riverside.fm. There's a few extra bells and whistles, so I'm sure as we kind of get going on this, I'm sure that we'll come to love it. But there's always a learning curve with new stuff. So bear with us if things look a little different, if things are a little patchy. We'll get it figured out and hopefully get this going with more regularity, or at least more consistency. So talking about the Missouri Basketball Tigers, since that's what we're here to chat about. It's been a really pretty quiet summer. They did sort of miss out on one of their top targets, the 2026 class. Earlier in the spring. But since the players have hit campus, the only thing that we really have going on is some occasional workout videos get posted to Twitter. Nothing terribly exciting. Nothing that we're really learning. This is the best time of the year for coaches because everybody looks great. Everybody's invested and all that kind of stuff. There's no playing time to be missed and all that sort of thing. So the main thing that we're looking at in June and early July is a lot of recruiting. So we're going to lead off here with the most recent news. Missouri kind of landing a big commitment. If you are only getting your news through Rock M Radio and you're not going to Rock M Nation or Rock M Plus for any additional news, then you may not be aware. But basically, Missouri's top player on their board for the class of 2027 decided to wrap up his recruitment and just committed to Missouri, which is great news for Tigers and Tigers fans. His name is Scottie Adkinson. He is a wonderful young man who has chosen the best high school in all of Missouri to attend. That would be Webster Groves High School. He is a statesman. He's already won a state championship. He's been Gatorade Player of the Year. He is a high 4-star player. Matt Harris just updated ESPN's rankings, came out. He is number 31 on ESPN, 37 on 247, and slotted 26 by On3 Sports. Watkins, how excited were you when this news sort of came across your feed?
Oh, I would say pretty excited. I think it was more unexpected in the bigger sense than actual excitement about the player. And not that I'm not excited about Scottie Adkinson, just that, as you had said, it had been a very quiet summer, and then all of a sudden we hear various things that, Mizzou may be getting a commitment today. Who could it be? Well, turns out it's Scottie Adkinson, which was a pleasant surprise, I think. You see a guy ranked in that area, and you can kind of think about a comparison to Honor Boateng, who is ranked in that almost exact area as well. But when you look at the two players, they're quite different. Boateng being much more of a physically advanced player, maybe a little bit lacking or a little bit behind in the skill development category. And then you look at someone like Scottie Adkinson, who's the exact opposite. Not to say Honor doesn't have skills and Atkinson doesn't have athleticism, but when you're looking at his developmental process, Atkinson is definitely a skilled player and one who can score the basketball pretty well in what we've seen from him thus far in high school and on the summer circuits. So, I think it's a good thing. Anytime you get a commitment from a player like that, it's a good thing, even though he's just now going into his junior year, so we're a couple of years away from it, the rubber really meeting the road, so to speak. But I think it's a good thing for Mizzou.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily rule out the possibility of him, moving up classes. I think he's a little bit, and not that he's not old for his grade, but he is on the older side for his grade. So it's one of those things like if your academics are sorted out, it's one of those things that you can do. As a sophomore, he was the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state, won a state championship. He's playing for Mocan Elite, and he's been dynamic for them. So it's one of those things where it wouldn't surprise me if we sort of progressed this a little bit and he moved into the 2026 class. I don't necessarily think that's like a certainty or that's anything that we might be thinking is going to happen right now. But I would say like it wouldn't surprise me, and it would be a situation where, even if he does end up reclassing, let's say that he doesn't and he stays in the 2027 class, this is going to mark the second sort of like big time high level commitment that Missouri has gotten from a point guard or combo guard, depending on how you want to classify him. Well ahead of like the kind of the normal recruitment. I think most commitments kind of start to kind of eke out in like the spring before a kid's senior year, and usually by the fall, most things are kind of wrapped up. There's a few kind of elite guys that maybe hold off until the spring. Handful that maybe commit over the basketball season itself, but it is pretty rare for a player to basically decide a year and a half out of just like his normal recruiting calendar that he's ready to shut it down. But by all means, like Missouri has done a really good job positioning themselves. Kyle Smith-Peters was the kind of lead recruiter. Anytime with a top target like this, Dennis Gates is always going to take a primary role as well. So those two, made sure that Atkinson's family felt very comfortable at Missouri. You kind of had pointed out on some of their social media that if you look hard enough, like you could actually see him at one of their summer workout sessions. So it's very clear that like, they were putting some distance between themselves and like the rest of the crew. And this is all also, ahead of the timeline, which is going to allow them to kind of, fend off, say some traditional blue bloods in schools that might, come knocking, as that normal recruitment calendar sort of progresses.
Yeah. I mean, I looked and I think it was the official offer went out in October of 2023. Mizzou offering Scottie Adkinson. So yes, it is an early commitment, but when you realize that they've been recruiting him for 2+ years, I think that probably makes a little bit more sense. It's not like they just got involved a couple weeks ago and this happened. No, I mean, Adkinson was on campus for bragging rights last year, along with several other prospects who Mizzou is still in on. But it's been a long process. They put in the work, and something you can say for the staff. They're not going to win every single prep recruiting battle, but when they get their hooks in a guy, they do pretty well.
Yeah, and the 2027 class is a deep one for some local targets too. I know that some fans may be acutely aware that Jimmy McKinney has a son who is in the 2027 class. He's playing for Vashon. He is a highly rated 4-star prospect. A kid that I'm a big fan of is Chase Branham out of Rogersville. People are unfamiliar with where Rogersville is. If you're not accustomed to the southwest portion of the state. It's a little ways out of Springfield, Missouri.
Way down.
Yeah. So, but another, highly rated 4-star prospect. Branham's a little bit more of like a true combo guard, shooting guard. McKinney is probably kind of like that, similar to Atkinson in that he's a kind of a point guard, maybe as a scoring guard, like presence. It'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out because having Atkinson, who, I think we both agree is like their top target, maybe can shift the board a bit, and we'll see. Maybe it is, just kind of becomes a race to like who's the first one to commit, whether it's Branham or McKinney, and then you just take that guy and just and let the other one move on. Because I can't imagine that you'd want all three. I think that might get into a bit of a crowded class.
Yeah, we'll have to, and of course it depends on whether Scottie Adkinson stays in the 2027 class or if he moves up to 2026, what they get in the 2026 class. I think they're probably not going to take commitments from all three at this point, but 12 months from now, the calculus could change pretty dramatically. So I think, that's the nice thing about getting things done this early is it gives you time to plan about what you want to do and get your top targets on board and take care of things that way.
And so landing a recruiting target 2 years out when you haven't even landed a 2026 target, it is one of those things like, the 2026 class, it does seem to be that, and Matt Harris is kind of putting together some stuff on some of the, we'll say some of the higher end targets. Dennis does seem to be kind of taking some big swings. They did miss out on J.J. Andrews after Andrews committed to Arkansas. He has a bit of an Arkansas legacy, so they were kind of hoping that maybe, Cal slow walk that enough that Missouri could kind of step in. Didn't happen. But the 2026 class does kind of feel like it's going slower. They do have Tony Bryant, who is planning on coming in. He's sort of like a top 25 level post guy, sort of a new wave post guy. They've got Dylan Mingo, who's sort of a disruptive defensive guard with some kind of developing ball skills. But he's like a top 15 level kind of combo guardy player. So he is kind of taking some swings. And I think they're still wanting to bring in a post, although the post board might be thinning out a little bit. They have Sheik Pearson was one of their top targets in the 2026 class, and he is already committed and he reclassified too, I think, to go play for Marquette. Yeah. So that is a bit of a hit. And then Tristan Reed.
Not Terrace. His younger brother.
Yeah, not Terrace. I was close to saying Terrace. It is Terrace's brother, though. Tristan has been kind of a guy sort of right there who's, Missouri has been in on for a very long time. And then the other guy, Ethan Taylor. I was looking, couldn't find his first name. I remembered Taylor. Taylor is a guy who Missouri was on very early. The market for him has kind of gotten formidable here lately as some of his skills have blossomed. He was always kind of like looking like a project, and some of those skills are starting to come together. He's gone from sort of like a top 100 level guy to he's currently ranked 21st, 22nd on 247 Sports. So, with all of these things kind of getting crowded for them, if they're the likelihood of them maybe taking two bigs has decreased a bit. They've missed out on, unless I guess they could get, Tony Bryant. I'm always skeptical of going well out of your region when you are a non-blue blood school and no real history of recruiting in that footprint. And so both Mingo, who is a New York kid, and Bryant, who I think is a New Jersey kid.
I thought he was from Florida.
I think
Bryant,
he's
that is.
currently in Florida, but I think
Okay.
he's originally from maybe it's either Pennsylvania or New Jersey.
Okay.
But I think he's originally from the Northeast. It's always hard because like these guys' recruiting profiles always list them where they're, it's
Right.
like 247 lists all these guys as being from Missouri, and because they're at Link Academy. It's like, I mean, he's not a Missouri player.
Right.
Like Chase Branham, yes. Scottie Adkinson, yes. Jimmy McKinney Jr., yes. Like those guys are Missouri players. But like, what was it? Curtis Givens was listed as a Missouri player. I mean, if you go to if you like sort by state on 247, you get a list and like the top 5 guys are all at Link Academy, and it's like, all right. But as far as like the board, it does seem like Dennis is taking some swings. Bryant is so he's ranked 12th. Mingo is ranked 7th. This is all 247 sports. And then Taylor is 22nd. Reed has stalled a little bit. I know he's still in the top 100, but he's fallen a bit. 71st is where he is. So all solid. And then Aiden Chronister, I think they were still recruiting him, is 69th. Nice. So it is going to be kind of interesting to see, especially now that they have a 2027 kid and a top level kid, like what the 2026 board kind of looks to do as we flesh out. Any final takes on the recruiting side before we kind of move on to rostery stuff?
No, it's.
I know it's your strong suit is the high school recruiting.
Yeah, I just find it funny how we have this guy who spends all this time crunching film, looking at numbers, blah blah blah, and then when we want to do a podcast on recruiting, it's this Matt that comes on. It's like, yeah, these are guys. I like him. Okay.
And he's off hitting golf balls.
I know. It's just it's aggravating. I want to be the one hitting golf balls right now.
I have no desire to be hitting golf balls right now. Not in 91 degree weather. I'll take the pool, and a nice light lager or something like that.
That comes out.
Yeah. So let's get into the roster because you did kind of do a I guess we'll call projections version 1.0. For anybody who enjoys some of the preseason stuff that we do. Last year, we sort of changed the game a bit and started actually doing projections all around the SEC. There was a lot of kind of interesting things that came out of it. I think, one of the things we looked at was each coach's sort of tendency to, play X number of players, like X number of minutes. So we were able to kind of, delineate just a blank roster, not a blank roster, but a filled out roster, and try to actually fill that into roles based upon, history. And we got some interesting results. We nailed some stuff. You miss on stuff. It's, it's all guesswork. Not complete guesswork. That's the wrong term.
Educated guesswork.
Educated guesswork. But there's some estimating going on. I can't seem to get your thing to load here. There we go. So your projections, and we're, I think, probably a couple weeks, a week or two from doing everybody's top 8, one of my favorite off-season projects. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Matt Watkins' top 8 based upon his projections. So top 8 is always, who do you think is going to be the top 8 guys in minutes played at the end of the year? And everyone always squawks at me and says, oh, well, Dennis Gates wants to play like a bigger lineup. He wants to go 10 deep. I'm like, that's fine. He can play 15 guys if he wants to, but the minute breakdown is going to have 8 guys who have more than everyone else. Like that's like you don't evenly distribute all the minutes. So what happens is you have like this stepping stone of guys playing fewer and fewer minutes as you go down the roster. Your leaders here look to be Mark Mitchell, big surprise. Anthony Robinson,
another big
let's
surprise.
pray he can stop fouling. Sebastian Mack in the 3 spot. Trent Pierce as the 4 spot, not the starting 4, just as the 4th most minutes. Javon Porter may be a surprise to some, coming in 5th with 58% of the minutes. Then Jacob Cruz, 44.3. Honor Boateng, 34.1. And T.O. Barrett at 28.7. That's 8, right? I think
that
go
is
over
8. Yep.
Okay. So T.O. Barrett, Honor Boateng. Barrett playing about a quarter of the minutes. Boateng playing about a third. Cruz playing about 44%. Porter. Your first round, what did you like about how this came out? What did you not like? What might need some tweaks?
Well, I almost kind of like doing it the first time better than I like doing it subsequent times, because this is just my opinion. I haven't talked with anyone about whether this is accurate or not. This is just kind of my first guess and what my gut feeling is. And it's based on several things. First of all, I went through every player's numbers, career numbers, to look at what they do well, what they struggle with, how the team might be built with these players, what guys fit in what roles. And this is what I came up with. Now, as the summer goes along, I start talking with people like, hey, who looks good, blah, blah, blah. And then as we get even closer, it's like, well, maybe I feel like this guy should be higher, this guy should be lower based on what I've heard or what we're seeing, So this is the only time throughout the entire process that it's just my opinion. I feel pretty good about the minutes breakdowns, like how many minutes those slots are playing, but which guys occupy those slots, that's a bit of a question. But as far as how I liked it, Anthony Robinson did have some consistency issues, but he did play 20 minutes a game. Mark Mitchell, I believe, led the team, if not was top 2 last year. So those guys are pretty safe bets to be in the top 3 or 4. Sebastian Mack is a guy who I like, and I think the staff likes. And Mizzou doesn't really have an obvious combo guard replacement on the roster, so that's why I like him at 3rd. And then you have Trent Pierce and Javon Porter, which, some might say they're pretty similar players, and I think there's some truth to that. But, when I really look at Javon Porter, you'll hear, well, he's not a 5. Like, well, that's fine, but he can play the 5 to me. He defends well. And when you look at his offensive stats, especially his shooting numbers, if you get those types of numbers out of the 5 position versus 3 or 4, they all of a sudden look a little bit better. If you've got a starting center who's 6'11", can defend a little bit, and shoots 30% from 3-point range, that's not bad. But if you look at your starting wing doing that, that's not really what you want shooting-wise. So, I was pleasantly surprised when I dug into his numbers in film that he really did step up this year defensively, including guarding some pretty tough interior matchups in the West Coast Conference, like St. Mary's and Gonzaga, and even like teams like Oregon State and Washington State weren't bad. So when you look at what he's done, I think he projects pretty well there. But, where does that leave a guy like Sean Phillips? Well, he just missed. Perhaps he's better than Javon Porter. I don't know, but that's my opinion at this point. And then you look at guys just beyond that. Jacob Cruz, who I think is going to give you the shooting that you need. Shot 35% from 3-point range in SEC play last year. That's going to be something important for this team to have. And then I included a few rising freshmen, or I guess they're rising sophomores. I don't know, whatever it is. Freshmen last year, sophomores next year, who I kind of learned my lesson last year, despite having all of the evidence laid out over many years, going back to Dennis Gates' time in Tallahassee, that freshmen take big jumps after their freshman year to their sophomore year. I knew that, and yet I still had Anthony Robinson 7th or 8th last year in the preseason projections and Trent Pierce 10th. Well, that was wrong because they got a lot better. So I'm betting on those guys, those freshmen, becoming better as sophomores this year. So that's how I kind of got to my top 8. And there's some guys that are just outside of that I would not at all be surprised. You know, a Jaden Stone, a 5th-year, 6th-year player coming in, has a scoring record, and Dennis Gates has absolutely nailed Horizon transfers when it comes to getting guys who come in and fill a very viable role. So you've got a Sean Phillips just outside the list, Trent Burns just outside the list. Any of those guys I could see making a jump inside the top 8. But at this point, just based on what we know, based on history and those sorts of things, this is what I came up with.
Well, and it is, it is one of those things like the minutes projection, what a guy is playing, the total at the end of the year is going to look different than what, game 29 is going to look like, right? So, yeah, like Mark Mitchell, did lead the team in percentage of minutes played, but it was 66.9. And how you're able to get other guys' minutes is by not playing Mark as much earlier in the season when you don't need him. Playing him 18, 19, 20 minutes a game instead of 28, 29, 30 minutes a game. But I think once SEC play rolls around, you're going to see those roles kind of get defined, and you are going to expect to see Mark Mitchell in the 30 to 32 minute, per game range, along with, Anthony, as long as he's not fouling. We've talked about Sebastian Mack and sort of his physicality, his rugged defensive ability. If he can kind of get, things working offensively and become a consistent shooter, like I don't see how you keep that guy off the floor a whole lot, just because he's already doing everything else well. And he gets the free throw line a lot. But it is going to be interesting because, like talking about Porter, I think, Porter's ability to play, the 4 and the 5, Trent Pierce's ability to, because this is all about who can you guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trent Pierce can probably go 3 through 5. His size can bother people on the perimeter. He played the 5 a lot last year. I mean, he started 19 games basically at the 5. And so like how they sort of divvy those up is going to get interesting. And also like how guys sort of take to this off season. Like we're just now starting to kind of hear how guys are doing in workouts. And, like we kind of joke, like it's that time of year, everybody looks great. But as you get past like the implementation of different like offensive concepts, who's going to pick those up better, who's going to adapt, and then I think at the end of the day, what we'll probably see is, is a good 9 to 10 man rotation sort of filter itself out. That is going to leave some people out, and that's Dennis's job to sort of figure it out and see who's kind of deserving and who isn't. There was something that I was also going to ask you about this.
Well, while you're thinking of that, I'll make one point. No matter who I talk with about these projections, this can be people on Rock M Plus, friends, people who might have some input on this in actuality. About 90% of the time I hear, well, this guy should be getting more minutes. Like, this is every minute accounted for. So whenever you talk about a guy who I have down 8th, 9th, 10th in the rotation about needing more minutes, that's going to come out of someone's pocket. It's not just, okay, well, we'll bump him up 5 minutes a game. Well, then you're playing more minutes a game than are actually allowed. Everything about this is a give and take. So, any guy towards the bottom of the rotation is going to have to take someone's minutes above him if he moves up, and that's just how it works, So I don't know if that gave you ample time to recreate the question in your head. I just wanted to.
No, not at all. But it does bring up a good point, because I think like this is always the lesson that you learn every time you do like the top 8 in the rotation is like everybody sort of has a clear idea, I think, who like the top 4 or 5 guys, and then it gets a little muddy. It does tend to bear out at the bottom of the roster that certain guys are just more likely. And I think, because of the prevalence of the transfer portal, because of the prevalence of, bringing in stopgaps, that, it can not necessarily stunt development, but it is going to keep younger players off the floor, because it's going to raise your floor as a team to, maybe play a less talented guy, particularly early. But I do think that, you've noted the sophomore jump. It is going to be, I think, like the most interesting thing to me, because when I was looking at your projections, the thing that I think Honor Boateng and Tio Barrett could see an increase in minutes over what your projections are. Mainly because we did see that from Trent Pierce and Ant Robinson. I think the ceilings on Barrett and Boateng are higher, or potentially higher based upon where those guys started. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. I think so. I may not fully agree, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, yeah. So like what we sort of thought we were going to get from Honor, maybe, when you just see what the rankings are. Mm-hmm. And then you also know like he was, had a little bit of a setback, because he was injured early in the summer, and having sort of like that full season of development, and then you're able to kind of hear from people around the program that, like where he was at the, beginning of the season versus the end of the season is different, but we had already kind of established, where the program was with the guys on the floor, like you're not going to start sitting Tamar Bates and Caleb Grill,
right.
And the SEC tournament, like you're gonna play those guys. So and then anytime Barrett was on the floor, like I just think like he was at least all last season sort of prone to some questionable decision making at times, but he was always competitive. He always defended well, and he did make a lot of good things happen when he was on the floor with the ball in his hands.
And he's a big kid too. That shouldn't be forgotten. You got a guy like Anthony Robinson or Trent Pierce who are pretty wispy as far as their size goes. That's not the case with Tio Barrett. I mean, he is built like, to use the overused term, a football player. He is a big kid, 6'4", well built, strong. And that gives you a little bit more leeway when you step on the court when you're built like that. Same thing with Honor Boateng.
So I do wonder if, getting sort of further into it, like minutes projections, if you are going to, maybe push some of the top guys, pull them down a little bit. Because again, like looking at last season's minutes, just last season, I haven't fully calculated Dennis's slot minutes yet. I need to do that. But Mark played basically 67%. And in your current projections going into next year, you've got him at about 72.
And Mark was out for a game and a half last year. So give or take, that's pretty close to where he was last year.
And he did play. He have some heavy minutes in like the middle third of the SEC season where he was playing. I think we even noted like he was probably playing a bit too much. So next up was Tamar at 64.5. Tony was at 54.4. He was a guy who was sort of banged up early in the season, kind of prevented some of his minutes from peaking out. You know, Caleb Grill did miss some time. He ended up at 55.7. Ant was healthy all year, but obviously, like some of the foul trouble, he was at 55.6. You know, but the guys like kind of the back end of the rotation, Josh Gray was at 37.5. Jacob Cruz 31.2. I do agree with you. We could see like an increase there. Quez was 32.6. So, like, is that something that you've kind of considered as, you know, bringing down maybe the top guys a little bit to sort of, you know, bring up some of the guys sort of at the bottom end of that 8-9 range?
The minutes that I have posted on there, which again, if you're members over at Rock M Plus, these are all posted up for you to look at. But the minutes that I have there are basically a weighted average of Dennis Gates teams at Mizzou and at Cleveland State, with a little bit of Florida State pecking orders mixed in. Less on the Florida State front since it wasn't his teams. But, you know, the more recent teams at Cleveland State, his second and third year teams, and then, of course, this past year's team are weighted more heavily to get to that because those bear more resemblance to what this could be as opposed to a first year team. But, yes, they're included. But I think the big thing is that last year, there was just so many little injuries here and there that I think knocked guys' minutes down. Like you had Mark Mitchell miss a game and a half. I think Anthony Robinson sat a game in non-conference season. Tony Perkins was banged up what seemed like all season long. Caleb Grill missed games, you know. So I think last year is more of a little bit more of an outlier, that you had so many guys jammed up in the middle versus having it a little bit more spread out. But it's possible we could see that. I just don't know that with this year's depth being a little bit less deep than last year as far as 1 through 14 on guys you want to play every night. But, you know, I could be wrong on that. We'll see. But it's been considered. I just think that, you know, it's going to be a little bit more of a condensed rotation, I guess is the better way to put it. It's still going to be deep. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to go with 6.5, 7 guys playing all the minutes every night. That's never going to be the thing. But I don't think you're going to be seeing that 8 or 9 guys in the rotation playing as many minutes as they did last year.
So with that said, we're going to get out of here. We are up against the 5 o'clock timeline that you and I both set. So we're going to be back in a couple weeks, or somebody will. There will be more dive cuts in a couple weeks. Experiment number 1 with the new software seems to be mostly a success, and we'll continue to learn. If you are watching, you notice I did kind of figure out what happened with my headphones, so hopefully that didn't happen again. I can keep hearing everything that Watkins has to say. So for next couple weeks, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll be back. Thanks for tuning. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. We'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.